that comes not from years, but from loss. From waking every morning to an empty bed. From cooking dinner for one. From the particular silence that settles over a home when the person who made it a home is gone. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a heart,
And you
was a
are as
photograph.
charming as ever.
Her wedding day. Aurelius beside her, his hand at the small of her back, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. She couldn't remember what. Couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that. 3 years. 3 years since the cancer took him. 18 months of watching him fade of hospital rooms and false hope, and the gradual terrible understanding that some battles cannot be won. Then the funeral, the condolences, the casseroles from neighbors who didn't know what else to do, and then eventually the silence. Everyone had moved on. Back to their lives, their families, their intact worlds. And Serafina remained here in this apartment that was supposed to be their beginning, surrounded by photographs of a future that would never arrive. She turned away from the window. The clock on the wall read 8:15. Too early to sleep. Too late to pretend the day still held possibility. She tried everything. Therapy, support groups, throwing herself into work at the art gallery where she curated exhibits for people who still believed beauty mattered. Nothing helped. Nothing touched the hollowness that had taken root inside her chest. Tonight, she decided. Tonight, she would do something different. She didn't know what. Only that she couldn't spend another evening in this apartment with these walls that seemed to shrink a little more each day, with these memories that had become more prison than comfort. Serafina changed into a dress she hadn't worn since before. Midnight blue, the fabric clinging to curves she'd forgotten she had. She left her hair down, dark waves falling past her shoulders. Put on lipstick, perfume. The small rituals of a woman preparing to face the world, or perhaps preparing to flee from herself. The Crimson Eclipse was a nightclub on the edge of downtown, the kind of place she'd never been, would never have considered. But a colleague at the gallery had mentioned it once, said it was for people who needed to lose themselves for a few hours. To feel something, anything in the darkness and the music and the press of other human bodies. Serafina needed to feel something. The line outside stretched down the block, but she didn't join it, didn't plan. Simply walked to the entrance, and somehow impossibly the doorman stepped aside, as if he'd been expecting her, as if the universe had decided for once to offer no resistance. Inside, the world transformed. The music was a physical thing, bass that thrummed through the floor, through her bones, sinking with a heartbeat she thought had gone numb. Lights sliced through the darkness, red, blue, violet. Strobe effects that made movement seem disjointed, surreal, like watching life through a fractured lens. The crowd was thick, bodies moving in waves, lost in their own rhythms, their own escapes. Serafina made her way to the bar, ordered something she didn't intend to drink. The glass was cold and sweating in her palm. An anchor, something to hold while she figured out why she'd come here. And then she saw him. He was dancing alone in the center of the floor, and the crowd had made space for him without seeming to realize it. As if his presence bent gravity, created a pocket of emptiness in the chaos. He was shirtless, white hair long enough to brush his shoulders, catching the strobe lights like captured moonlight. His skin was pale, not sickly pale, luminous pale. The kind of skin that seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. And covering his chest, his arms spiraling across the muscles of his abdomen, were tattoos. But these weren't ordinary tattoos. They were symbols, ancient, intricate. Designs that seemed to shift and breathe with every movement of his body, spirals and runes and geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they contained meaning too dense for casual observation. The ink appeared to glow faintly in the darkness, though that might have been the lights, might have been her imagination. He moved like water, like smoke, with a precision that wasn't quite human, too fluid, too perfect. His head tipped back, exposing the column of his throat, and for a moment Serafina forgot to breathe. She'd seen beautiful men before, had married one, had loved him with everything she had. But this was different. This was dangerous beauty. The kind that made you forget your name, your history, the careful walls you'd built to keep yourself safe. She found herself moving toward him, not a conscious decision, more like gravity, like the inevitability of rivers flowing to the sea. The crowd parted for her the way it had parted for him, or maybe she simply stopped seeing anyone else. The world narrowed. The music faded to background noise, and she stepped into his orbit. He turned. His eyes were silver, actual silver like moonlight on steel, with a depth that made her feel like she was falling. They fixed on her, and something in his expression shifted. Surprise. Recognition. As if he'd been waiting for her, though they'd never met. "Are you the dancer?" Serafina heard herself ask, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. He stopped moving. The music continued. The crowd pulsed around them, but he became perfectly still. A slow smile curved his lips. His teeth were white, perfectly straight, and in the flickering light they seemed just a touch too sharp. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel coolness radiating from his skin, could smell something like rain on ancient stone. His presence was overwhelming, not threatening, but vast, like standing at the edge of an ocean and feeling the weight of all that dark water. His lips brushed the shell of her ear as he whispered, "Private performances only." The words sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the sudden, inexplicable certainty that her life had just changed forever. Serafina pulled back just enough to meet his gaze again. "I'm Serafina. Most people call me Sarah." "Dante." His voice was velvet over gravel, smooth and dark and impossibly deep. "Dante Nocturne." He held out a hand palm up, an invitation. She shouldn't take it. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she didn't know this man, that there was something wrong about him. Something other. The temperature of his skin, the way the light seemed to bend around him, the sense that he existed slightly outside the normal flow of time. But Serafina had spent 3 years being rational, being careful, being alone. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, cool and strong, and he pulled her closer. Not into a dance, not exactly, but into his space, his world. The boundary between them dissolved. He studied her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever. "You don't belong here," he said, not unkindly. "Neither do you." His smile widened, perceptive. "Who are you, really?" The question tumbled out before she could stop it. Direct, almost rude. But standing this close to him, like feeling the magnetic pull of whatever he was, pretense felt impossible. Dante tilted his head. White hair cascaded over one tattooed shoulder. "Someone who's been dancing alone for a very long time." His thumb traced a circle on the inside of her wrist, over her pulse. His eyes flickered with something that might have been hunger, might have been recognition. "Someone who's been waiting." "For what?" "For you to ask me that question." Serafina laughed. The sound surprised her. Nervous and breathless, but real, genuine. The first real laugh she'd made in 3 years. "That's a line if I've ever heard one." "No lines." Dante's expression turned serious. "Not with you. Never with you." He released her hand but didn't step away. "Would you like to leave this place? Talk somewhere quieter?" She should say no, should thank him for the dance they hadn't really had, and walk away. Go home to her safe, quiet apartment and forget about the shirtless stranger with impossible eyes and beauty that felt like falling. "Yes," she heard herself say instead. Dante's smile was like sunrise, unexpected and transformative. He led her through the crowd which parted before them like water. Serafina glanced back once at the dance floor, at the life she'd known, the careful, controlled existence she'd built from the ashes of her grief. And then they were outside. The night air was cool, October settling into the city with a crisp edge that promised winter. The club's music was a muffled thump behind them, the street nearly empty. Dante finally released her hand and Serafina immediately missed the contact. He pulled on a black shirt and that had been tucked into his belt, covering the tattoos, the impossible luminous skin, but doing nothing to diminish his presence. "Where are we going?" she asked. "There's a rooftop garden a few blocks from here. Trees. Stars." Silence. He looked at her, and something vulnerable flickered across his features. "If you'd prefer somewhere more public, more safe, I understand." Serafina studied him. In the glow of the streetlights, she could see him more clearly. The sharp angles of his face, the impossible perfection of his features, the way his skin seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. There were shadows under his eyes, not from lack of sleep, from something deeper, something ancient. "The garden sounds perfect," she said. They walked side by side, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the coolness emanating from him. It was October, the air crisp with autumn, but he seemed to carry winter with him wherever he went. "How long have you been alone?" Dante asked suddenly, his eyes fixed ahead. The question struck like a physical blow. "What makes you think I'm alone?" I recognized the look. His voice was soft. "I've worn it for centuries." Serafina stopped walking. Centuries. Dante turned to face her, and there was no humor in his expression now, only a terrible honesty. "I'm not what you think I am, Sarah. I'm not what anyone thinks I am. He took a step closer. She held her ground even as her heart began to race. I'm what they whisper about in the dark, what they make stories about to scare children, what your rational mind says cannot exist. You're trying to tell me you're a vampire? She said it flatly, waiting for the punchline, the moment when he'd laugh and admit this was all some elaborate game, performance art, a peculiar way to flirt. Not trying, telling. He held up his hand, and before her eyes his nails lengthened into claws, sharp and deadly, curved like scythes. Then just as quickly they retracted, normal fingernails again, as if the transformation had never happened. I am a vampire, he said quietly. Not just any vampire. I am their king. I have ruled the night for 300 years. Serafina should have run, should have screamed, should have done anything except stand there staring at him, feeling a strange calm settle over her like snow. I believe you, she whispered. Dante's eyes widened, genuine surprise flickering across his face. Just like that. I don't know why, but yes, just like that. She wrapped her arms around herself. Not from cold, from the magnitude of what she'd just accepted. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I've finally snapped. But I look at you and I know you're telling the truth. You're not crazy. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. Gently brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. His fingers were cool against her skin. You're something else. Something I've never encountered before. His hand lingered near her cheek, not quite touching. Fearless when you should be terrified. Why aren't you running, Sarah? She considered the question, searching her own heart for an answer that made sense. Because I've been running for 3 years, from loneliness, from pain, from the feeling that I'm living half a life. She met his silver gaze. And tonight, for the first time in forever, I feel awake, alive. Even if you're a monster, you're the first real thing I've felt in years. Dante's expression crumbled. Centuries of control breaking apart. He closed his eyes, jaw clenching. You don't know what you're saying. Then tell me. Tell me everything. When he opened his eyes again, they were bright with something that looked like tears, though none fell. Walk with me, he said softly, and I'll tell you a story about a boy who became a monster, and a monster who became a king, and a king who has been searching for meaning in the darkness for longer than you can imagine. The rooftop garden was an oasis suspended above the city, trees planted in massive containers, their branches forming a canopy against the star-filled sky. Benches scattered among flower beds gone dormant for winter. String lights woven through the foliage, casting everything in a warm golden glow. Dante led her to a bench beneath an oak tree, its leaves rustling in the October breeze, and he began to speak. I was 25 when I was turned, a soldier in 1724 fighting in a war I didn't believe in for a king I'd never met. His voice was low, rhythmic, like a story told many times worn smooth by repetition. I was dying on a battlefield, my blood soaking into mud and ash, and she found me. Hutira, Morrigan, an ancient vampire, older than empires. She said I had potential, that she saw something in me. He paused. She gave me a choice. Die a human death, or live forever as something else. You chose to live. I chose not to die. There's a difference. He stopped beneath the oak tree, its branches bare against the sky. For the first 100 years, I was a monster in truth. I killed without thought, fed without mercy. I was strong and I was free, and I didn't care about the lives I destroyed. Serafina watched his face, saw the pain etched into every line. She wanted to comfort him, but didn't know how to comfort someone who'd lived through centuries of darkness. What changed? She asked quietly. I watched a child die. His voice cracked. A little girl, maybe 8 years old. I didn't kill her. Another vampire did, one of my kind, and I watched it happen, and I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. And in that moment of emptiness, I realized I had become something worse than a monster. I had become indifferent to suffering. He turned to her. The anguish in his eyes was raw, painful to witness. I couldn't undo what I was, but I could change what I did with this immortality. So I hunted down the vampire who killed her, and then I hunted down every vampire who preyed on the innocent, who killed for sport, who had forgotten what it meant to have humanity. I became a king not through inheritance, but through conquest, through forcing my kind to live by rules, to feed without killing, to remember that the blood in human veins comes from beating hearts. You built an empire on redemption, Serafina said. Understanding dawning. I built a cage and called it a kingdom, I enforced laws I created to keep monsters in check, myself included. He met her eyes. I haven't killed a human in 200 years, Sarah. I feed from donors who give consent, who understand what I am. I protect the innocent from my kind, but I'm still what I am. Still cold, still dead, still damned. Serafina stepped closer to him, close enough to see the silver flecks in his eyes, the way his white hair gleamed in the string lights. You're not damned. You don't know that. I know that someone who's damned doesn't spend centuries trying to atone. I know that a true monster wouldn't have told me any of this. You could have lied, could have pretended to be human, could have made me fall for an illusion. She placed her hand on his chest, over where his heart should beat, feeling no heartbeat, but sensing something deeper, something essential. But you told me the truth, because you're not a monster, Dante. You're just someone who's been carrying guilt and loneliness for far too long. Dante covered her hand with his, cool fingers interlacing with hers. I'm dangerous to you. Maybe, but I've been safe my whole life, and it's gotten me nowhere but alone. Sarah, her name on his lips was a prayer, a plea, a warning all at once. I lost my husband 3 years ago, she said, the words spilling out like confession. Cancer. He was sick for 18 months, and I watched him fade a little more every day. I held his hand when he died, and a part of me died with him. And ever since, I've been going through the motions, pretending to live while feeling nothing at all. Until tonight. Until you. Dante pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd told her about being a monster. She leaned into him, into his coolness, and felt safer than she had in years. I don't want to hurt you, he whispered into her hair. Then don't. Just let me feel alive again, even if it's only for tonight. He pulled back to look at her, expression torn between desire and restraint. One night won't be enough. Not for me. Not now that I've found you. Then more than one night. You don't understand what you're offering. Then show me. Teach me. Let me choose this, Dante, the way you chose to live that night on the battlefield. Something in him surrendered. She saw it happen, saw the walls he'd built over centuries crumble in the space of a heartbeat he didn't have. He cupped her face in his hands, touch reverent, and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as though he was afraid she might break. But Serafina pressed closer, her hands sliding up his chest to tangle in his white hair, and the kiss deepened. He tasted like winter and starlight, like something indefinable, something that sang in her blood and made her feel like she was finally home. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, despite only one of them needing air, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I've been waiting for you, he said, the words raw with truth. Centuries of walking through darkness. And I didn't even know I was waiting until you asked me if I was the dancer. And are you, she asked, echoing her first question to him. For you, I'll be anything you need me to be. They stood there under the oak tree, wrapped in each other's arms as the night deepened around them. Somewhere in the city, people were dancing, drinking, living their ordinary lives. But here in this pocket of shadow and string lights, something extraordinary was beginning. Come home with me, Serafina whispered, not for anything but to talk, to be near each other. I don't want this night to end. Dante smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look young and hopeful and almost human. Neither do I. Her apartment felt different when she opened the door, less like a tomb, more like a threshold. Dante hesitated at the entrance. I need your invitation to enter. It's part of what I am. Then I invite you in, Dante, into my home. She paused, heart in her throat. Into my life if you want it. His eyes blazed with silver fire. I want it more than I've wanted anything in 300 years. He stepped across the threshold, and Serafina closed the door behind them, sealing them away from the world. The apartment was small but warm. Books lined the shelves, plants on the windowsills, photographs on every surface. The remnants of the life she'd built with Aurelius. She'd been afraid it might feel wrong. Bringing Dante here, into this space that had belonged to her and her husband. But instead, it felt like a new chapter beginning. Dante moved through her living room slowly, taking in the details. He paused at a photo on the mantel, her wedding day, both of them laughing, young and in love. He was a good man, Dante said quietly. I can see it in the way you looked at him. He was. Serafina moved to stand beside him, looking at the photo with eyes that no longer filled with tears at the sight. He would have liked you, I think. Dante turned to her, surprise evident on his face. Why do you say that? because he believed in second chances, in redemption, in the power of love to transform even the darkest situations. She looked up at him. He would have seen what I see. Not a monster, but a man who's fighting to be better than what fate made him. Dante pulled her close, tucked her against his side. I don't deserve you. That's not for you to decide. That's for me to decide. She rested her head on his shoulder. And I decide that you deserve to be loved, Dante. That you deserve to feel something other than guilt and loneliness. That you deserve a chance at happiness, even if you have to steal it from the darkness one moment at a time. He kissed her again, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. This was a claiming, a promise, a declaration. Serafina surrendered to it, let herself feel everything she'd been holding back for 3 years. The passion, the need, the desperate desire to connect with another soul. When they finally broke apart, both of them trembling with restraint, Dante rested his cheek against her hair. I should leave. The sun will rise in a few hours and I need to return to my sanctuary before then. What happens if you are caught in sunlight? I burn, not immediately, not like in the stories, but slowly, painfully. The older I get, the longer I can endure it, but it's still agony. Serafina's heart clenched at the thought of him in pain. Then stay here. Sleep here if you can sleep. I'll make sure no light gets in. You do that. Let a vampire into your bedroom, your most vulnerable space. I'd let you anywhere, Dante. I trust you. His arms tightened around her. You shouldn't. You barely know me. I know enough. I know that in one night you've made me feel more alive than I have in 3 years. I know that when I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see someone who's been fighting his own darkness for centuries and winning one choice at a time. She pulled back to meet his gaze. I know that I want to see where this goes, wherever that might be. Dante searched her face, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that she didn't mean what she was saying. But Serafina met his gaze steadily, letting him see the truth in her eyes. I'll stay, he said finally, but I sleep in a way that might disturb you. I don't dream, I don't move. I become like death itself until the sun sets again. I don't care, I just want you here. She led him to her bedroom, the space where she'd slept alone for 3 years, where she'd cried herself to sleep more nights than she could count. The blackout curtains she'd installed after Aurelius died, when even morning light had felt like too much to bear, would now serve a different purpose. Dante removed his shoes but kept his clothes on. Ever the gentleman, Serafina changed in the bathroom, her heart hammering the entire time. When she emerged in sleep clothes, she found him standing by the window, looking out at the city lights through a gap in the curtains. What are you thinking about? She asked. How small my world has been for so long. How I've surrounded myself with subjects and rules but never let anyone truly close. How I've been king of the night but utterly alone in my crown. He turned to her. The vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. And how in one night, one conversation, one kiss, you've shattered that isolation completely. Serafina crossed to him and took his hand. Then let's be alone together. They lay down on the bed. Dante pulled her into his arms, her back to his chest. His body was cool but not uncomfortably so, like lying against marble on a summer day. She could hear him breathing, slow and measured, even though he didn't need to breathe. Why do you breathe if you don't have to? She asked into the darkness. Habit, camouflage, and because I like the way the world smells. Flowers, rain, bread baking, your hair. He nuzzled into her hair as if to prove his point. Vanilla and honey, and something uniquely you. Serafina smiled, feeling safe and cherished in a way she'd thought she'd never feel again. Tell me something about you that nobody else knows. Dante was quiet for a long moment, his arms tightening around her. I paint. I've painted for 200 years. Landscapes, portraits, abstracts. I paint because it's the only way I can express what I feel without words. It's the only way I can create instead of destroy. I'd like to see your paintings someday. I'd like to show them to you. I'd like to show you everything about me. Every dark corner and hidden room. I don't want secrets between us, Sarah. Then I'll tell you my secret too. She turned in his arms so she could see his face in the dim light filtering through the curtains. I came to that club tonight planning to do something stupid. I was going to find someone, anyone, and lose myself for a few hours just to feel something other than empty. I was being reckless and self-destructive, and I didn't care. Dante's jaw clenched. But you found me instead. I found you instead, and instead of feeling empty, I feel full. Instead of being reckless, I feel like I'm finally making a choice that matters. She touched his face, traced the sharp line of his jaw. You saved me tonight, Dante. From myself, from my loneliness, from my grief. And you saved me, he whispered, from an eternity of walking through darkness alone. They kissed again, soft and sweet, and then Dante settled her back against him, holding her like she was something precious and fragile. Sleep, he murmured. I'll watch over you. You don't have to. I want to. I want to watch you dream, watch you rest, watch you be at peace. I want to memorize every moment of this night so that when I sleep my death-like sleep, I'll carry the memory of you into the darkness with me. Serafina felt tears prick her eyes. I'm falling for you. Is that crazy to fall for someone in one night? If it's crazy, then we're both insane, because I fell for you the moment you asked if I was the dancer. His lips brushed her temple. And the answer is yes, Sarah. I am the dancer, but only for you. Only ever for you. She drifted off to sleep in his arms, feeling safer and more content than she had in years. And Dante held her through the night, watching over her as he'd promised, his ancient heart that no longer beat somehow feeling fuller than it had in centuries. When dawn began to creep toward the horizon, Dante felt the pull of his unnatural sleep. He tightened his arms around Sarah one last time, breathing in her scent, memorizing the warmth of her body against his. I love you, he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him, but needing to say the words anyway. I love you, and I will spend every night of my immortal existence proving myself worthy of you. Then the sun rose, and Dante fell into the darkness, still holding the woman who had become his light. Serafina woke hours later to find Dante exactly as he'd warned her. He lay utterly still, not breathing, not moving. His skin cool and pale as marble. For a moment, terror gripped her. He looked dead, truly dead, and she had to fight the urge to shake him awake. But then she remembered his words and forced herself to remain calm. This was part of what he was. Part of loving him meant accepting all of him, even the parts that seemed frightening or impossible. She carefully extracted herself from his arms, went about her morning, made coffee, stared at her phone knowing she should call work, should maintain the pretense of normalcy. Instead, she found herself walking back to the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, watching him. In sleep, he looked younger, peaceful, the centuries of pain erased from his features. She reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed her fingers through his white hair. He didn't stir. She stood, walked to her closet, and in the back behind boxes of Aurelius's belongings she'd never been able to sort through, she found what she was looking for. A small wooden box, locked. The key was in her jewelry box. She retrieved it, returned to the bedroom, sat cross-legged on the floor with the box in her lap. She'd promised herself she wouldn't open this, that some things were better left buried with the dead. But Dante had been honest with her, had told her truths that must have cost him dearly. She owed him the same honesty, even if he couldn't hear it yet. The lock clicked open. Inside were Aurelius's personal effects, things the hospital had given her, his wallet, his wedding ring, and a small leather journal she'd been too afraid to read. Serafina opened the journal. The first entry was dated 2 years before they'd met, before Aurelius had walked into the art gallery where she worked and asked her opinion on a painting, before their first date, their first kiss, before she'd thought he was the love of her life. The handwriting was his, but the words made no sense. Confirmed sighting of Subject 7 in the gallery district. Will initiate contact tomorrow. The Ashmore bloodline must be protected at all costs. Subject 7, Ashmore bloodline. She flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. Each entry more impossible than the last. Aurelius hadn't been an architect. That had been a cover. He'd been part of something called the Morrison Covenant, an organization of vampire hunters spanning back centuries. And he'd married her not because he'd fallen in love at first sight, but because her bloodline made her a target, the Ashmore line, descended from the first vampire-human hybrid ever created. Every 7th generation produced a woman with dormant genes, genes that could make her something other than human if turned. Serafina's hands shook as she read. Aurelius had been assigned to protect her, to keep her hidden from the vampire world, from those who would use her, those who would kill her, those who would turn her to unlock the power sleeping in her blood. But somewhere along the way, the mission had changed. I was supposed to protect her. Instead, I love her. God help me, I love her more than the mission, more than my vows. If they discover this, they'll pull me from assignment. They'll send someone else, someone who won't love her the way I do. The entries continued, years of them, Aurelius documenting his double life, hunting vampires in secret while building a marriage with her, protecting her from threats she never knew existed. And then 3 years ago, the final entries. They've found her. The Nocturne line knows about Sarah. I've fought them off twice now. But I'm outnumbered, outmatched. The cancer diagnosis is a cover. I'm dying from vampire venom. Slow, painful. But it gives me time to put protections in place. Seraphina's vision blurred with tears. I'm dying because I refuse to give them Sarah. Refuse to let them turn her. Refuse to let her become a pawn in their immortal games. If I have one regret, it's that I can't tell her the truth. Can't explain why I'm leaving her, but maybe it's better this way. Maybe if she doesn't know, she'll be safe. The last entry was dated the night before he died. Dante Nocturne is coming for her. I've seen it in the prophecies. In the visions the seers have shown me. He's the vampire king. 300 years old, powerful beyond measure, and he's been dreaming of Sarah for 50 years without knowing why. I pray he loves her the way I do. Pray he protects her the way I couldn't. Because the alternative, if he turns her for power, if he uses her to break the curse that binds vampires to darkness, then everything I've sacrificed will have been for nothing. So if you're reading this, if you've found this journal, then I'm gone and you've met him. Trust your heart, not prophecy, not fate, not what anyone tells you you're supposed to be. You are more than your bloodline, more than your destiny. You are the woman I loved, the woman I died protecting, the woman who deserves to choose her own path. Choose love if you can find it. Choose life, even if that life is forever, even if it's with him. The journal fell from Seraphina's hands. She sat there on the floor of her bedroom, while a vampire king slept the sleep of the dead in her bed. While the truth of her entire marriage rearranged itself in her mind, Aurelius had loved her. She didn't doubt that. The journal made it clear. He'd loved her enough to die for her, to give up his mission, his vows, everything. But he'd also lied to her. For their entire marriage, every day had been built on a foundation of deception, no matter how well-intentioned. And Dante had been dreaming of her for 50 years, painting her face across centuries. The portraits she hadn't seen yet. The visions he didn't understand. This wasn't chance. Wasn't fate bringing two lonely souls together. This was prophecy. Bloodlines, destiny grinding forward with the weight of centuries. Seraphina looked at Dante's still form, at the man, the creature who had been honest with her in a way Aurelius never had, who had told her the truth about what he was, what he'd done, what he could become, and she made a choice. She would see his paintings, would learn the full truth about who she was, what she could become, but she wouldn't run, wouldn't let prophecy dictate her path. Aurelius's last words echoed in her mind. Choose love if you can find it. She'd found it, in a nightclub, in a shirtless dancer with silver eyes and impossible beauty, in a vampire king who'd spent centuries atoning for the monster he'd been. Choose life, even if that life was forever. Seraphina stood, placed Aurelius's journal back in the box, locked it, and made a promise to the memory of the man who'd loved her first. She would choose, not because of bloodlines or prophecy or the dreams of vampire kings, but because for the first time in 3 years she wanted to live. And if that meant walking into darkness with Dante Nocturne, then she would walk with her eyes open and her heart unguarded. The sun would set in a few hours. Dante would wake, and when he did, she would tell him everything. About the journal, about Aurelius, about the truth of who she was, and then they would face whatever came next together. Not as prophecy demanded, but as two broken souls choosing to heal each other. One night at a time, one dance at a time, one impossible beautiful choice at a time. The sun set at 6:14. Seraphina had been sitting beside the bed for the last hour, watching the light fade from the sky beyond her blackout curtains, watching for the moment when Dante would return to life. Or whatever passed for life when you were already dead. The change was subtle at first, a flutter of his eyelashes, a faint intake of breath that his body didn't need but remembered how to take. Then his eyes opened silver and bright, and he turned his head to look at her. You stayed, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Of course I stayed. I told you I would. He sat up slowly, white hair tumbling over his shoulders. His eyes found the wooden box on her nightstand, the journal beside it, and something in his expression shifted. You found something. It wasn't a question. My husband kept a journal. I'd never read it before today. Seraphina's voice was steady, though her hands trembled in her lap. He wasn't who I thought he was, and apparently neither am I. Dante went very still, that preternatural stillness that was impossible for anything living. Tell me. So she did. She told him about Aurelius, about the Morrison Covenant, About vampire hunters spanning centuries protecting humanity from the darkness. About bloodlines and prophecies and a woman born every seventh generation with genes that could change everything. He married me to protect me, she said, from vampires who would want to use what I am, from those who would kill me to prevent what I could become. She picked up the journal. And he died protecting me, from your kind, from those who were searching for me. From me, Dante's voice was flat, empty. He knew you were coming, that you've been dreaming of me, painting me for 50 years. Serafina met his eyes. He wrote that he hoped you'd love me the way he did, that you'd protect me where he couldn't. I didn't know. Dante stood pacing to the window. I swear to you, Sarah, I didn't know about the prophecy, about your bloodline. I thought the dreams were madness, that I was losing myself to loneliness. He turned back to her. I painted you because I couldn't get you out of my mind, because for 50 years, every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face. I believe you. He stared at her. How can you believe me? How can you trust anything I say after this? Because you told me the truth about what you are before you knew who I was. Because you could have lied last night. Could have hidden all of this. She stood crossing to him. And because the journal doesn't change how I feel. Aurelius loved me. You love me or you're beginning to. And I'm choosing to believe that some things transcend prophecy. Dante cupped her face in his cool hands. I need to show you something. My sanctuary. The paintings. All of them. His voice was raw. You need to see what I've been carrying. What I've been dreaming. And then you can decide if you still want this. I've already decided. Decide again after you know everything. His sanctuary was a converted warehouse on the edge of the city. The kind of building that had been forgotten by progress left to decay until someone with vision and unlimited time had transformed it into something else entirely. The exterior was unremarkable. Brick and steel, graffiti on the walls. But when Dante unlocked the door and let her inside, Serafina stepped into another world. The space was vast. 3 stories of open loft with exposed beams and industrial windows. But every inch of wall space was covered with paintings. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Serafina moved through the gallery of Dante's soul and her breath caught in her throat. The earliest paintings were violent, chaotic, all blood red and shadow black with figures twisted in agony. Battlefields, hunting scenes, a young man with dark hair standing over bodies, his hands dripping crimson. That's what I was, Dante said quietly behind her. In the beginning. She moved forward through time. The paintings evolved. The violence gave way to landscapes. Cities at night, moonlight on water. The palette shifted from red and black to blues and silvers and grays. This is when I started to change. When I saw the child die and realized what I'd become. Further still, the landscapes became more beautiful, more detailed. Sunrises painted from memory, their golds and pinks and oranges rendered with an aching precision, as if he was trying to capture something he could no longer experience. I painted the sun for 100 years, trying to remember what it felt like, trying to hold on to my humanity through color and light. And then 50 years ago, the paintings changed again. A woman appeared, dark hair, hazel eyes, a smile that was hopeful all at once. The same woman over and over in different settings, different centuries, different lives. Serafina in a Victorian dress, in a 1920s flapper outfit, in 1970s bell-bottoms, in modern clothes, always the same face, always her. I painted you for 50 years before I knew your name, Dante said, his voice breaking. Sometimes you were dancing, sometimes reading, sometimes just standing in sunlight looking at something I couldn't see. And I thought I was going mad, thought the loneliness had finally broken me. The most recent paintings were different still. They showed a throne, ornate and ancient, and beside it empty space, as if waiting for someone, waiting for a queen. I painted this 6 months ago, Dante said, gesturing to the largest canvas, before I'd ever been to the crimson eclipse, for I knew you were real. I painted a throne in an empty space and I didn't understand why. Serafina turned to look at him. At this vampire king who had been carrying her in his mind for half a century, who had transformed himself from monster to artist, from killer to protector, who had been waiting for her without knowing he was waiting. Show me the throne, she said, the real one, not the painting. Show me your world, Dante, all of it. His court met in a place called Obsidian Hall. The name was literal. The entire structure was built from black volcanic glass walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was hidden beneath the city, accessible through tunnels that wound down into the earth like the passages of some ancient tomb. Dante held her hand as they descended, his grip firm, protective. "My court doesn't know about you yet," he said. "They're going to see you as weakness, as distraction. Some will try to use you against me. Others will simply want you gone. And I want you safe, but I also want you to see who I am in this world. What I rule, what I've built." He stopped at a massive door carved with symbols that matched his tattoos. "This is your chance to walk away, Sarah. After tonight, if you stay, there's no going back. You'll be part of this world, and this world is dangerous. I'm not walking away." He kissed her, hard and desperate, then pushed open the door. Obsidian Hall was breathtaking. The ceiling vaulted 3 stories overhead, supported by pillars of black glass. Chandeliers hung from iron chains, their crystals catching firelight from sconces along the walls. The floor was polished stone inlaid with silver symbols that formed a pattern too complex to follow. And everywhere there were vampires, hundreds of them, all ages, all eras. A woman in an Elizabethan gown stood beside a man in a Roman toga. Someone in a 1940s military uniform conversed with another in ancient Japanese armor. Centuries of undead existence gathered in one impossible space. They all turned when Dante entered. The silence was immediate and absolute. Dante's hand tightened on Serafina's. He led her forward through the crowd that parted before them, toward the front of the hall where 2 thrones sat on a raised dais. One throne was occupied, the other stood empty. On the occupied throne sat a man who looked like Dante. Same white hair, same sharp features, same impossible beauty. But where Dante's eyes were silver, this man's were gold. And where Dante moved with controlled grace, this man radiated barely leashed violence. "Brother," the man said, his voice carrying through the hall, "you've been absent from court for 3 nights. We were beginning to worry." "Lucien," Dante's voice was formal, cold. "I didn't realize my presence was required." "It isn't, but when the king disappears, rumors begin." Lucien's golden eyes fixed on Serafina. "And now I see the rumors were accurate. You've brought a human to Obsidian Hall." The crowd stirred, whispers rippling through the assembled vampires like wind through leaves. "This is Serafina Ashmore," Dante said, his voice ringing with authority, "and I present her to this court as my intended queen." The whispers exploded into chaos. Vampires shouting, some in outrage, some in disbelief, a few in what might have been approval. Serafina stood frozen, Dante's hand the only anchor keeping her from drowning in the noise. Lucien raised one hand and silence fell again. "A human queen," he said. "How progressive, how very modern of you, brother." He stood descending from the throne with liquid grace. "But you know the laws. A consort must prove herself worthy, must demonstrate that she can survive in our world, that she won't be a liability. Sarah is no liability. Then she won't mind proving it." Another voice cut through the hall, female, ancient, carrying weight that made even Lucien step back. A woman materialized from the shadows, tall and regal with hair like ink and skin like porcelain. She wore a gown that seemed to be made of darkness itself, shifting and flowing as she moved. Her eyes were black, completely black. No white, no iris, just endless void. "Morrigan," Dante breathed. The ancient vampire smiled. "Hello, my children. It's been too long." She glided forward and Serafina felt the temperature drop 10 degrees, felt power radiating from this creature like heat from a furnace. A human in Obsidian Hall, a human wearing the scent of my youngest son. Morrigan circled Serafina like a predator. "And not just any human. I can smell the bloodline on you, girl. Ashmore, 7th generation. How delicious." "You knew," Dante said, accusation in his voice. "You knew about her all along." "Of course I knew. I've been watching the Ashmore line for centuries, waiting for the 7th generation to manifest." Morrigan reached out her fingers, ghosting near Serafina's cheek without touching. "I turned you 50 years ago, Dante. Right when she was born. I gave you the dreams, the visions. I painted her face in your mind so you would recognize her when the time came. Why, Mathaim? Because prophecy is only useful if it's fulfilled. And you, my dear boy, are the key to fulfilling it." Morgan turned to address the court. "The Ashmore bloodline carries the potential to evolve vampire kind, to break the curse that binds us to darkness, but only if turned by the right vampire. A king, a ruler, one who carries the balance of monster and man." She gestured to Dante. "I turned Lucien first 4 years earlier as my first attempt, but he retained too much violence, too much of the monster. He would have destroyed the bloodline, not elevated it. Lucian's face went carefully blank. Then I found Dante. Perfect balance. Monster enough to survive the transformation. Human enough to preserve the humanity in the blood. I've been preparing him for 300 years for this moment. Serafina felt sick. You orchestrated everything. The dreams, the meeting, all of it. Not the love girl, that's real. I can manipulate circumstances but not hearts. Your vampire king loves you truly, as does his bloodthirsty brother in his own way. Morgan's smile was terrible, but love makes this so much sweeter. A willing transformation. A queen who chooses the darkness. That's how prophecy becomes reality. Get out, Dante said, his voice shaking with fury. Get out of my hall, out of my city. You're not welcome here. I built this court, child. I shaped you into a king. You don't dismiss me. Morgan's eyes fixed on Serafina. But I will give you a gift. 30 days. Let the girl live among us for 30 days. Learn our ways. See what she's choosing. If at the end you still wants this life, then turn her with my blessing. And if I refuse, then I take my blessing back. Every vampire I've turned, every vampire they've turned, will feel the blood bond snap, including dear Lucy. Bien, hundreds will die, thousands, all because you couldn't give me 30 days. Morgan tilted her head. Choose King Dante, your pride or your people. The hall was silent. Serafina stepped forward. I accept. Every eye turned to her. I accept the 30 days. I'll learn your world, prove myself to your court, and then I'll make my choice. Not because of prophecy, not because some ancient vampire orchestrated it, but because it's my choice to make. Morgan's laugh was like breaking glass. Oh, she has spirit. Yes, she'll do nicely. She turned to Lucian. Brother will oversee her education. Teach her our history, our laws, our ways. If she survives 30 days, we reconvene. And with that, Morgan dissolved into shadow and was gone. The court erupted in noise again, vampires arguing, debating, making wagers on whether the human would last a week. Dante pulled Serafina close, his body a shield between her and the crowd. You didn't have to do that, he said into her hair. Yes, I did. She would have killed hundreds. I won't have that on my conscience. She's using you. She's using both of us. But we're not her puppets, Dante. We can play her game and still make our own choices. Lucian approached and Dante tensed, but the golden-eyed vampire merely bowed to Serafina. My lady, it seems I'm to be your teacher for the next 30 days. I promise to make it educational. His smile showed too many teeth. Try not to die before the month is up. It would be terribly inconvenient. The 30 days began the next night. Serafina had called her work, explaining she was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons. They'd understood. She'd been running on autopilot for 3 years. Everyone knew she needed time to heal. They just didn't know healing would involve ancient vampires and impossible choices. Lucien met her at Dante's sanctuary at sunset. The golden-eyed vampire was more approachable in the light of the studio, less threatening away from the court. First lesson, he said, settling into a chair. You need to understand what we are. Not the mythology, not the stories, the truth. And so began Serafina's education. Lucien taught her about vampire origins, about the first turn centuries before recorded history, about the curse that bound them to darkness, that made sunlight agony and denied them the simple pleasures of mortal life. We don't age, don't die, don't get sick, but we also don't change. We're frozen in the moment of our death forever. Some of us embrace it. Others, like Dante, spend centuries trying to reclaim what we lost. He taught her about feeding, about the hunger that was both physical and spiritual, about how vampire venom created euphoria in humans, making the act of feeding addictive for both parties. Dante feeds from consenting donors, pays them well, ensures they're healthy and willing. Most of us aren't so ethical. We take what we want. The king's laws keep us in check, but laws only work when they're enforced. He taught her about vampire politics, about the courts scattered across the world, about power struggles and blood feuds and alliances that span centuries. Dante rules through strength and fear. He's the most powerful vampire in the Northern Hemisphere. But power attracts challenges. There are always those who think they can take what he's built. That's where you come in. In my harm, a human queen is either a symbol of weakness or of strength, so absolute he doesn't fear showing vulnerability. Everything depends on how you carry yourself. Show fear and you make him weak. Show courage and you make him unshakable. The lessons continued every night. History and law and the intricate web of vampire society. But Lucienne also taught her practical things. How to move silently, how to read vampire body language, the subtle tells that indicated aggression or submission, how to defend herself if she needed to. You won't beat a vampire in combat, but you can survive long enough for help to arrive. That's all that matters. During the days while Dante slept, Serafina explored his sanctuary. The paintings became familiar, each one a window into his evolution. She started sketching too. Hadn't drawn since college, but something about being surrounded by art reawakened that part of her. She drew Dante sleeping. Drew his hands, his face, the fall of his white hair across the pillow. Drew the tattoos that covered his body, trying to understand the symbols or the meanings layered into his skin. And every evening when he woke, they talked about everything, about his 300 years of existence, about her 30 years of life, about Aurelius and grief and the strange path that had led her to a vampire's bed. 1 week into the 30 days, Dante fed from her for the first time. He'd been hesitant, made her promise she could say no at any time, explained that his venom would create pleasure, that she might become addicted, that this was a line they couldn't uncross. I want this, she'd said. I want to know all of you, even this part. He'd bitten gently. The pain was sharp and then gone, replaced by euphoria that crashed through her like a wave. She felt his mouth on her throat, felt him drinking, and understood in that moment why humans sought this out, why they became donors, why some were willing to die for this feeling. When he pulled away, his eyes were molten silver. You taste like sunrise, he whispered, like everything I've lost and everything I'm afraid to hope for. They made love that night for the first time, his body cool against hers, his touch reverent and desperate all at once. And when Serafina cried out his name, it felt like prayer and blasphemy and coming home all at the same time. 2 weeks in, she attended her first vampire gathering outside of court. It was held in a warehouse similar to Dante's sanctuary, but this one was filled with music and laughter and vampires dancing in ways that would make humans weep with envy. Lucian stayed close, introducing her to the younger vampires who were curious about the human their king had claimed. One of them, a vampire named Elena, who'd been turned in the 1980s, pulled Serafina aside. He's different with you, she said. Dante, I've been part of this court for 40 years, and I've never seen him smile like he does when he looks at you. How was he before? Cold, fair but distant, like he was going through the motions of ruling without really being present. Elena's eyes were kind. You brought him back to life, or as close to life as we get. Serafina watched Dante across the room. He was talking with Tiberius, the ancient Roman centurion, who served as his second in command. Even from here, she could see the difference. The way he laughed at something Tiberius said, the ease in his posture. As if sensing her gaze, Dante looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded warehouse, and he smiled. That smile that was only for her. He crossed the room, offered his hand. Dance with me. The music was slow, sensual. They moved together, and Serafina remembered that first night at the Crimson Eclipse, when he'd been a shirtless stranger and she'd been a grieving widow looking for any escape from her pain. Private performances only, she whispered against his ear. Always, he murmured back. Only for you. Only ever for you. 3 weeks and Morrigan returned. She appeared in Dante's sanctuary without warning, materializing in the middle of a painting session. Dante had been teaching Serafina about color theory, showing her how to mix the perfect shade of twilight blue. How domestic, Morrigan said, her voice dripping with amusement. The big bad vampire king playing art teacher. How the mighty have fallen. What do you want? Dante's voice was ice. To check on my investment. See how our little human is adapting. Morrigan circled them. Tell me, Serafina, have you grown to love our darkness, or do you still cling to dreams of sunlight? I miss the sun, Serafina said honestly. I miss a lot of things about being human. But I'm learning to appreciate what this world offers too. Diplomatic. I like that. You'll need diplomacy as queen. Morrigan stopped in front of a painting of Serafina in sunlight. This is what you'll lose, you know, if you choose transformation. Daylight, the taste of food, the simple pleasure of a heartbeat. All of it gone forever. I know. And yet you're still here, still playing house with my protege. Why? Serafina met those endless black eyes. Because loneliness is worse than darkness. Because I'd rather have eternity with someone I love than a normal lifespan alone. Because Dante makes me feel alive in ways I haven't felt since I lost my husband. Love, Morrigan said the word like a curse. Always love with you mortals. You build entire lives around it. Destroy yourselves for it. It's your greatest weakness and your only real strength. She turned to Dante. 1 week remains. Choose wisely, king. Choose right. Prophecy doesn't like to be disappointed. And she was gone. The final week arrived and Serafina felt the weight of her choice pressing down like a physical thing. She spent her days awake while Dante slept sitting in her old apartment looking at photos of her life before Aurelius got sick, before he died, before she met a vampire king and fell in love with darkness. She called her sister, told her she was thinking of moving away, starting fresh somewhere new. Her sister was supportive, said it was about time Serafina stopped living in the past, if only she knew. On the 28th day, Serafina asked Dante to take her somewhere. Where? The cemetery. I need to visit Aurelius. I need to say goodbye properly. They went at midnight. The cemetery was closed, but locked gates meant nothing to a vampire king. Dante lifted her over the fence with ease, then they walked together through rows of headstones illuminated by moonlight. Aurelius's grave was simple, a flat marker with his name dates and the word beloved. Serafina knelt on the grass. Dante stood a respectful distance away, giving her privacy for this moment. I found your journal, she said to the headstone, speaking to the memory of the man she'd loved. I know the truth now, about what you were, what I am, what you died protecting. The wind rustled through the trees. I'm angry at you for lying, for building our marriage on secrets. But I understand why you did it. You loved me enough to die for me. And I'm grateful for every moment we had, for every lie that kept me safe. She touched the cold stone. But I'm letting you go now. Not from my heart. You'll always be my first love. Always be the man who taught me that I was worth loving. But I'm choosing to move forward, to live again. Even if that life looks different than anything you imagined for me. Serafina stood, looked at Dante where he waited in the shadows. I'm choosing him, Aurelius. I'm choosing darkness and eternity and a love that terrifies me because it's so big, so impossible. And I hope wherever you are, you understand. You wanted me to choose love, so I am. Dante crossed to her, pulled her into his arms, and together they stood in the cemetery surrounded by death, choosing life in the only way they knew how. On the 30th day, Serafina woke to find Dante painting again. But this time he wasn't painting her. He was painting sunrise, his brush moving across the canvas with fierce precision, capturing golds and pinks and oranges from memory, creating light he couldn't experience. What are you doing? She asked. Painting what I'm going to lose. He didn't look away from the canvas. If you choose transformation, you'll never see another sunrise, Sarah. Never feel warmth on your skin. Never taste chocolate or coffee or anything that makes being human bearable. I'm painting this so I remember what I'm asking you to give up. She came to stand beside him, looked at the sunrise taking shape on canvas. It was beautiful, heartbreaking, a love letter to a world he no longer belonged to. Paint me in it, she said. Paint me standing in sunlight one last time. And he did. He painted her in profile, face turned toward the sunrise, hair caught in golden light. Painted her with such love, such aching detail, that the canvas seemed to glow. When he finished, the painting hung in his sanctuary beside all the others, a record of what they were about to lose, a memorial to her humanity. That night they returned to Obsidian Hall. The court assembled. Hundreds of vampires gathered to witness the human's choice, to see if she would accept transformation or walk away. Morgan waited on the dais, a smile playing at her lips. Lucian stood to one side, his expression carefully neutral. Tiberius on the other, ancient eyes watchful. Dante held Serafina's hand as they walked through the crowd. His grip was tight, almost painful, as if he was afraid she might disappear. They stopped before the thrones, before Morrigan, before the weight of prophecy and choice and 300 years of waiting. 30 days have passed, Morrigan announced, her voice carrying through the hall. The human has lived among us, learned our ways, tasted our darkness. Now she must choose, transformation or mortality, eternity or ending. What say you, Serafina Ashmore? Serafina looked at Dante, at the vampire king who had saved her from loneliness, who had given her paintings and dance and a love that made her feel infinite. She looked at Lucienne, who had taught her strength, at Tiberius, who had shown her honor, at Elena and the other young vampires who had welcomed her into their impossible world. She looked at Morrigan, ancient and terrible, who had orchestrated everything but couldn't orchestrate this choice. I have a condition, Serafina said. The hall went silent. I'll accept transformation. I'll become what the prophecy demands. But not yet. Give me 1 more year, 1 year to live fully as human, to experience everything I'm about to lose, to say goodbye to my old life properly. A year is nothing, Morgan said. To you, to me, it's everything. Serafina's voice was steady. You've waited centuries for this. You can wait one more year. And if you change your mind in that year, then the prophecy fails. But at least it will fail because I chose it to fail, not because I was rushed into a decision I wasn't ready to make. Morrigan studied her, those black eyes seeing everything, revealing nothing. Then she laughed. A year. Very well. 1 year for the human to savor her mortality. And then we reconvene. She turned to Dante. Guard her well, King. She's more valuable than you know. The court accepted the decision, some grumbling but none daring to challenge Morrigan's word. As the crowd dispersed, Lucien approached. Clever, he said to Serafina, buying yourself time, making the choice yours rather than prophecies. I learned from a good teacher. His golden eyes softened. You'll make a better queen than I would have made a king. Dante chose well. He looked at his brother. Try not to waste the year moping about what you're going to lose. Celebrate what you have. And for the first time since they'd met, Lucien smiled. A real smile, one that made him look almost human. Dante and Serafina left Obsidian Hall hand in hand. Outside, the city was alive with night, cars and streetlights, and the distant sound of sirens. The normal world going on as if nothing impossible had just occurred beneath its streets. A year, Dante said. What do you want to do with a year? Serafina thought about Aurelius's journal, about his final wish for her to choose life, about the sunrise painting hanging in Dante's sanctuary. I want to travel, see the world in daylight while I still can. I want to taste everything, experience everything, make memories in the sun that will last through eternity. She looked up at him. And I want you with me, as much as you can be. Nights and twilights and every stolen moment. You'll have me, he promised. Every night, every shadow, every moment of darkness. I'm yours, Sarah, for this year and all the years after. They walked through the city, not to Dante's sanctuary, not to her apartment, just walking, being together, a vampire and a human, a king and a woman, two souls who had found each other against all odds and chosen to hold on. Above them, the sky began to lighten, dawn approaching. You need to go, Serafina said. The sun. One more minute. They stood on a street corner holding each other as the eastern horizon turned from black to gray to pale gold. Dante's skin began to smoke faintly, the first warning of damage to come. Go, Serafina insisted. I'll see you tonight. We'll start planning. Decide where to go first, what you want to see. Tonight, she agreed. He kissed her, hard and desperate, then dissolved into shadow, fleeing the approaching dawn. Serafina stood alone on the corner, watching the sun rise over the city, feeling its warmth on her face, knowing she had 365 more sunrises to savor, 365 more chances to be human, and then forever to be something else. She thought about Aurelius, about the life they'd built and lost, about the journal and secrets and love that transcended death. She thought about Dante, about paintings and dances and the way he looked at her like she was every sunrise he'd ever missed. And she thought about herself, about who she'd been, who she was becoming, who she would choose to be when the year ended and transformation called. The sun cleared the horizon, golden and perfect. And Serafina Ashmore, seventh generation of the Ashmore bloodline, soon to be queen of vampires, stood in its light and smiled. She was alive. And for one more year, she intended to live. 1 year later, Serafina stood on a cliff in Iceland, watching the midnight sun paint the sky in shades of gold and amber that refused to fade. The year had passed like a dream, like those final moments before waking when you know the dream is ending, but try desperately to hold on to it anyway. She'd kept her promise to herself, to Aurelius, to the memory of the woman she'd been before vampires and prophecy had entered her life. Paris in springtime, where she and Dante had walked along the Seine at twilight, that magical hour, when day surrendered to night and they could exist together in the fading light. She'd eaten croissants still warm from the bakery, while Dante watched with hungry eyes, memorizing the pleasure on her face. Tokyo in cherry blossom, seasoned, the petals falling like pink snow while she stood beneath the trees in daylight, and Dante waited for her in their hotel room, listening to her describe every detail when darkness finally came. The Amalfi Coast in summer, where she'd swum in the Mediterranean under the afternoon sun, tasting salt water and feeling warmth soak into her bones, while Dante painted her from photographs capturing the light on her skin that he could never witness himself. Iceland now in the depths of winter, where the sun barely rose and barely set, where twilight stretched for hours and they could walk together through landscapes that looked like the end of the world, like the beginning of something new. Last sunrise, Dante said behind her, his voice soft, careful, as if the words might shatter something fragile. Second to last, Serafina corrected. Tomorrow is the final one. I want to watch it from home. Home. Her apartment had ceased to feel like home months ago. Home was wherever Dante was, in his sanctuary surrounded by paintings of her in sunlight. In Obsidian Hall, learning to navigate vampire politics. In hotel rooms across the world where they'd stolen moments between his sleep and her waking. But she wanted to watch her final sunrise from the place where her human life had truly ended 3 years ago. Where Aurelius had died, where she'd learned what loss felt like. It seemed fitting to say goodbye there. They flew back to the city that night. First-class Dante hidden behind blackout curtains in a private pod, while Serafina pressed her face to the window and watched the sun chase them across the Atlantic. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it a year ago. Dusty now, frozen in time. The photographs of Aurelius still on the mantel. The kitchen where she'd stood the night she decided to go to the Crimson Eclipse. The bedroom where Dante had first slept beside her. It feels like a lifetime ago, she said, running her fingers along the back of the couch. That woman who lived here. I barely remember being her. Do you regret it, any of it? No. Serafina turned to face him. I regret that I can't have both. Can't keep the sun and have you too. But if I had to choose, I choose you. I've been choosing you every day for a year. Dante crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. Tomorrow night after the transformation, you'll never see another sunrise. Never feel warmth like this again. Are you sure, Sarah? Absolutely certain. I've never been more certain of anything. That night, while Dante slept his death sleep, Serafina packed away her human life. She gave most of her clothes to charity, kept only a few pieces that held memories too precious to discard, boxed up the photographs but not to throw away, to preserve, to remember who she'd been, who she'd loved before she became something else. Aurelius's journal went into a safety deposit box along with her wedding ring, not abandoning them, honoring them, keeping them safe for a future version of herself who might need to remember where she came from. She called her sister one last time. I'm leaving tomorrow, she said. The fresh start I mentioned. I'm going somewhere far away. Might not be able to call for a while. Are you happy? Her sister asked. Really happy. Serafina looked at Dante sleeping peacefully in her bed, white hair spread across the pillow. Yes, for the first time in years, I'm happy. Then I'm happy for you. Send postcards when you can. Let me know you're alive. Alive, the word hung in the air after her sister disconnected. Tomorrow night, Serafina would die, and what came after would be something else entirely. She lay down beside Dante, pressed her warm body against his cool one, and tried to memorize the sensation, the beating of her own heart, the rise and fall of her breathing, the simple, unremarkable miracle of being alive. The final sunrise came at 6:43. Serafina was already awake, standing at her window with a cup of coffee, her last cup of coffee. She'd made it strong, added cream and sugar the way she liked it, and now she sipped it slowly while the sky transformed from black to gray to gold. The sun emerged from the horizon like a promise, like a farewell, like every sunrise she'd ever witnessed, and completely unique all at the same time. She didn't cry, had cried herself empty over the past year, mourning in advance for everything she was about to lose. Instead, she felt a strange peace settle over her. Acceptance. Readiness. Goodbye, she whispered to the sun, to the daylight, to the warmth in the blue sky and the simple human pleasure of morning. Thank you for everything. The sun climbed higher. The city woke around her. And Serafina Ashmore, 31 years old, soon to be eternally so, finished her coffee and turned away from the window. Behind her, Dante stirred, opening his eyes as the sun fully cleared the horizon, as if he'd felt the moment she'd said goodbye to it. Today, he said. Tonight, she corrected. Let me have one more day, a few more hours of heartbeat and breath and warmth. Then I'm yours forever. They spent the day in quiet preparation. Dante made phone calls arranging everything for the ceremony that night. Serafina took a long bath, washed her hair, tried to relax muscles that had been tense for weeks with anticipation. At 4 in the afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Lucian stood in the hallway holding a garment bag. From Morrigan, he said, his golden eyes unreadable. For tonight. Inside the bag was a dress, crimson red, the color of fresh blood. The fabric was silk that seemed to shimmer with its own light, medieval in cut with a corseted bodice and flowing sleeves, a gown fit for a queen. She wants to make sure I look the part, Serafina said. You'll look beautiful. Lucien's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I came to say goodbye to the human you and to thank you. Thank me for not being afraid, for choosing this even knowing what it costs. You're braver than I was when Morgan turned me. He paused. I was dying, bleeding out on a battlefield in 1720. I begged her to save me, would have agreed to anything. But you're walking into death with your eyes open. That takes courage I never had. You found your courage in other ways. Perhaps. He turned to go, then stopped. If something goes wrong tonight, if Morgan tries anything, I'll stand with you, with both of you. You should know that. After he left, Serafina held the crimson dress and wondered what he'd meant. If Morgan tries anything. As if the ancient vampire had more plan than a simple transformation. Obsidian Hall had been transformed. The black glass walls were draped with crimson fabric. Candles by the thousands filled the space, their flames creating a cathedral of light and shadow. The assembled vampires wore formal attire as if attending a wedding, or a funeral, both Serafina supposed. Death and binding in one ceremony. She wore the crimson dress. Her dark hair was loose, falling past her shoulders. No jewelry except a simple silver chain, a gift from Dante, with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. His symbol, a mark of protection and possession all at once. Dante waited for her at the center of the hall, dressed in black that made his white hair seem to glow. He looked like a king, like a god of darkness, like everything beautiful and terrible about the night made flesh. Tiberius stood to his right, ancient and solemn, Lucian to his left, watchful, and between them on a raised platform, two thrones, one for a king, one for a queen. Morgan stood before the throne's arms raised, her black gown seeming to absorb the candlelight. Bring forth the willing sacrifice, she intoned. Serafina walked forward, not led, not dragged, walking of her own free will toward the death that awaited. The crowd parted for her, hundreds of vampires watching with eyes that gleamed red and gold and silver in the candlelight. Some looked hungry, others curious. A few, like Elena, looked almost sad. She reached Dante and he took her hand. Last chance, he whispered. I'll burn this place down before I force you into this. I'm not being forced. I'm choosing. Morgan's smile was terrible. How romantic. How very human, even at the end. She gestured to the platform. Kneel before your king, Serafina Ashmore. Offer your throat. Offer your life. Offer your eternity. Serafina knelt. The stone was cold beneath her knees. Dante knelt with her, facing her, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. I love you, he said. In 300 years, you're the only thing worth living for. I love you too. In all my lives, every version of me, I would choose you. Morgan began to chant, ancient words in a language that predated civilization. The candles flickered. The air grew thick with power. Dante's eyes met Serafina's one last time, silver and full of sorrow and love and desperate hope. Then he struck. His fangs sank into her throat, and the pain was bright and sharp and gone in an instant, replaced by euphoria. She felt him drinking, felt her blood flowing out of her, felt her heartbeat begin to slow. The world started to fade, colors bleeding away, sound becoming distant. Dante pulled back when her heart was barely fluttering, bit into his own wrist, pressed it to her lips. Drink, he commanded. She obeyed. His blood was cold, metallic, electric. It burned down her throat into her veins, spreading through her body like liquid fire. And then the pain truly began. Every cell felt like it was being torn apart and rebuilt. Her heart gave one final beat and stopped. Her lungs ceased their rhythm. Her body began to die, but something else was happening. Her blood began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, crimson light pulsing from her veins visible through her skin, the Ashmore bloodline activating, the dormant genes waking. Morgan's chanting grew louder, more urgent, and Serafina felt herself falling. Not into death, into something else, somewhere else, the in-between. It was a space without space, a moment without time. Gray mist stretched in all directions, and she stood in the center of it, her body translucent, caught between one existence and the next. Sarah. She turned, and there was Aurelius, not as he'd been at the end, wasted by the poison that masqueraded as illness, but healthy, whole, smiling at her with the warmth she remembered from their wedding day. You're not real, she whispered. You're just a hallucination, my brain's shutting down. Maybe. Does it matter? He crossed to her, and she could almost feel him. Almost. You found my journal. I found everything, the truth about what you were, what I am. I'm sorry I lied to you. I understand why you did. They stood in the gray mist, husband and almost widow, separated by death and transformation. I came to tell you something, Aurelius said, about the choice you're making. The Ashmore bloodline doesn't just make you a vampire, Sarah. It makes you something new. A hybrid. Vampire and human combined. You'll keep your heartbeat, your warmth, and if you're strong enough, you'll walk in daylight. That's not possible. Sunlight kills vampires. It kills vampires because they're dead, but you won't be dead. Not completely. You'll be something in between. Something that's never existed before. He took her hands, his touch like mist. But there's a power mouse. Hybrids don't live forever. You'll have 100 years, maybe a bit more, but not eternity. Not like true vampires. 100 years with Dante or eternity without him. That's still an easy choice. Aurelius smiled. I always knew you were braver than me. His form began to fade. Live, Sarah. Live fully. Love completely. And when your time comes, know that you chose it. Every moment, every heartbeat. Will I see you again when I die for real? I don't know, but I hope so. I'd like to meet him, this vampire king who makes you smile the way I used to. And then he was gone. The gray mist dissolved. Serafina felt herself pulled back toward her body, toward the pain, toward the transformation completing itself. She opened her eyes. She was lying on the stone floor of Obsidian Hall. Dante knelt over her, his face stricken with fear. Morgan stood above them both, her expression triumphant. And Serafina felt different. Her senses were sharper. She could hear every heartbeat in the room, every breath, every whisper. Could smell blood and fear and anticipation. Could see in the darkness as if it were daylight. But her own heart was beating. Slow, steady, alive. She sat up and the crowd gasped. Her skin was still warm, still flushed with color. Her eyes, she knew without seeing, would be silver like Dante's in darkness. But in light, they would be hazel, human. Hybrid, Morgan breathed. The prophecy was true. You're the first successful hybrid in 1,000 years. Serafina stood. The crimson dress swirled around her, and she felt power coursing through her veins. Vampire strength, human warmth, something entirely new. Dante reached for her, and she took his hand, his cool touch against her warm skin. Life and death intertwined. How do you feel, he asked. Alive. Still alive. And more than that, I can feel the night, Dante. Feel it singing in my blood. But I'm not dead. My heart is still beating. Morgan laughed, the sound echoing through the hall. Perfect. Oh, this is perfect. Even better than I hoped. What are you talking about, Lucien demanded. What did you do? I created exactly what I needed. A hybrid. A bridge between human and vampire. And now, with her blood, I can cure us all. Morgan's eyes gleamed. One drop of hybrid blood can transform a vampire. Give them back their heartbeat, their warmth, their ability to walk in daylight. I've been searching for a successful hybrid for centuries, and now finally I have one. You're not taking her blood. Dante's voice was deadly quiet. I don't need to take it. She'll give it willingly. Won't you, dear Serafina? To free all of us from darkness, to let vampires walk in the sun again. Surely you won't deny us that gift. Serafina felt every eye in the hall fix on her, felt the weight of their hunger, their hope, their desperate longing for what she represented, freedom from the curse. How much blood, she asked. Not much, a few drops per vampire. You'll heal quickly with your hybrid nature. We could transform dozens tonight, hundreds over the coming months. You'll be a savior to our kind. And if I refuse, Morgan's smile vanished, then I take it by force. I'm older than civilization, child, stronger than you can imagine. I've waited too long for this to let sentiment stand in my way. Lucien moved, faster than thought, placing himself between Morgan and Serafina. You'll have to go through me first. Tiberius stepped forward as well. And me. Elena and a dozen other young vampires joined them, creating a wall of bodies between Morgan and her prize. Traitors, Morgan hissed. I made you. I can unmake you. Try it, Lucien said, his golden eyes blazing. I've wanted to break your blood bond for 300 years. Let's see if you're as powerful as you think. Morgan raised her hand and power exploded from her like a shockwave. Vampires flew backward, crashing into walls. Lucien held his ground but stumbled. Tiberius went to one knee, and Serafina felt something inside her respond. The hybrid blood, the Ashmore power. It rose like a tide, like dawn, breaking like something that had been sleeping for generations finally waking. She stepped forward, raised her own hand, and light poured from her palm. Not fire, not violence, pure light, dawn light, sunlight distilled to its essence. It didn't burn the vampires around her, but it struck Morgan like a physical blow. and the ancient vampire screamed, "Impossible!" Morgan gasped. "Hybrids can't generate sunlight. This one can." Serafina's voice was steady, strong. "Because I'm not just any hybrid. I'm the seventh generation, the culmination of 1,000 years of bloodline evolution. And I didn't transform to become your cure. I transformed to be with the man I love." The light from her hand intensified. Morgan tried to flee, tried to dissolve into shadow, but the light held her, pinned her to the physical world. "You want to free vampires from darkness," Serafina continued. "Then earn it. Don't force it. Don't steal it. Let them choose. The way I chose. The way Dante chose to change from monster to king. Choice is what makes us more than our nature." "Pretty words," Morgan snarled. "But I am nature. I am the first vampire. I don't ask permission." "Then you die like the first vampire. Alone, unchanging. Refusing to evolve." Serafina poured more power into the light, and Morgan began to crack. Fissures appeared in her perfect skin, light bleeding through. The ancient vampire screamed again, a sound of rage and terror and disbelief. "You can't kill me," she gasped. "I'm immortal." "Nothing is immortal. Everything ends, even you." Dante was beside Serafina now, Lucienne on her other side, Tiberius and Elena and dozens of other vampires all adding their power to hers. Not attacking, just standing witness, standing together. And in the face of that unity, that collective choice to reject her tyranny, Morgan shattered. She didn't explode, didn't burn, simply fell apart like a statue of ash crumbling into dust that scattered across the obsidian floor. The hall fell silent, 1,000 years of manipulation, of blood bonds, enforced transformations, and vampires created to serve her agenda. Gone. Ended. By a hybrid who'd been human just hours ago. Serafina lowered her hand, the light faded, and she swayed exhausted. Dante caught her. "I've got you." "Is she really gone?" "Yes," he kissed her forehead. "You killed the unkillable, ended the first vampire. You're legendary now whether you want to be or not." Around them, vampires were stirring. The blood bonds Morgan had held were breaking. Those she'd turned directly felt it most strongly. Freedom from her control, from her manipulation, from the weight of her will pressing on them for centuries. Lucian fell to his knees, gasping. "I can't feel her anymore. For the first time in 300 years, I can't feel her in my head." Tiberius helped him stand. "Welcome to true immortality, brother. The kind where you choose your own path." The court looked to Dante, to Serafina, to their king and their new hybrid queen. "What now?" someone asked. Dante looked at Serafina. She looked back, and together they smiled. "Now," Serafina said, "we rest, we heal. We figure out what a world without Morrigan looks like. And tomorrow night we begin building something new. Not a court built on fear, but one built on choice." The vampires erupted in cheers. Not all of them. Some looked uncertain, others angry, but enough cheered that it felt like hope, like possibility, like the beginning of something that might actually last. 6 months later, Serafina stood on the balcony of Dante's sanctuary watching the sun rise over the city. The transformation had given her more than just vampire strength and senses. It had given her daylight, not full immunity. She could walk in the sun for a few hours before needing shade. But those hours were precious, were miracle. Dante emerged from the shadows of the sanctuary wrapped in thick clothes and dark glasses. He could tolerate brief exposure now, minutes instead of seconds. It was agony for him, but he endured it for her, to see her in the light she loved. "You don't have to," she said. "I can watch alone. I want to see you this way, just for a moment, just to remember what I've been missing." She took his hand, her warm skin against his cool palm. They stood together as the sun cleared the horizon and Dante's skin began to smoke faintly. "Beautiful," he whispered, looking not at the sunrise but at her. "You're so beautiful in the light." They retreated inside before the pain became unbearable. Serafina helped him remove the protective clothing, checked his skin for damage. Already healing as vampire bodies did. The past 6 months had been chaos. Good chaos mostly, but chaos nonetheless. The court had restructured. Vampires were learning to live without Morrigan's control. Some adapted well, others struggled. A few had left unable to function without her guidance. Lucian had become Dante's true second in command, no longer a rival, a brother finally. They worked together to create new laws, new systems, ways for vampires and humans to coexist that didn't rely on deception and predation. Serafina's hybrid nature had become legend. Vampires came from around the world to see her, to ask if she could share her gift. She'd tried with a few. given drops of her blood willingly. But transformation required more than blood. It required the right human. The right bloodline. She couldn't create hybrids the way Morrigan had created vampires. But she could give hope, could prove that change was possible, that vampires didn't have to remain frozen in darkness forever. "I've been thinking," Dante said as they settled into his studio. He'd been painting again. Not her in sunlight this time. Both of them together. In twilight. That space between day and night where they both could exist. "Dangerous habit," he smiled. "About the future. About how long we have. Aurelius told you, didn't he, in the in-between, that hybrids don't live forever. 100 years, maybe a bit more. And that doesn't frighten you," Serafina considered. "It should. 100 years is nothing compared to eternity. But it's also everything. It's a lifetime, Dante. Several lifetimes by human standards. And I'd rather have 100 years of truly living with you than an eternity of existing without you." "I'll outlive you," his voice cracked. "I'll have to watch you age, watch you fade, watch you die, and then I'll be alone again. For eternity, with only paintings and memories." She crossed to him, took his face in her hands, forced him to look at her. "Then we make those memories worth holding on to. We don't waste a single night mourning the ending before it comes. We live, Dante, fully, completely. We travel and paint and dance and build a world where vampires and humans can coexist. We make 100 years feel like forever. And when you're gone, you keep living. Keep being the king I know you are. Keep making the world better. And maybe someday you'll find another hybrid, another chance at daylight. Or maybe you won't. But either way, you'll have had this, had us, and that will be enough." He pulled her close. "Nothing will ever be enough, not when it comes to you. Then we'll make it enough, together." They stood in his studio, surrounded by paintings that chronicled their impossible love story. And outside, the sun climbed higher in a sky Serafina could now claim as hers. 1 year later, there was a coronation. Not in Obsidian Hall, on a hilltop at sunrise where every vampire in Dante's court could attend. Those who couldn't tolerate the sun wore protective gear. Those who could like the few hybrids Serafina had successfully created stood in the light. Serafina wore a crown of silver, shaped like crescent moons. Dante wore one of black iron, king and queen of the vampires, ruler of night and champion of twilight. Lucian performed the ceremony, his voice carrying across the hilltop as dawn broke behind them. "You stand witness to a new age, where choice matters more than power, where evolution is possible, where even the immortal can change. I give you King Dante Nocturne and Queen Serafina Ashmore. Long may they reign." The crowd erupted in cheers, vampires and humans both, a gathering that would have been impossible a year ago, deadly. But now it was celebration. After the ceremony, Serafina and Dante walked to the edge of the hilltop, looking out over the city waking below them. 99 years left," Dante said softly, "give or take. 99 years of this, of mornings and nights and everything in between, of building something that lasts beyond us, of loving each other until time runs out." She leaned into him. "I think that sounds perfect. Not perfect, but close." They stood together as the sun rose fully, the vampire king who could tolerate brief moments of daylight, the hybrid queen who could walk in the sun but chose darkness, two impossible souls who had found each other against all odds. And below them, the city lived on. Humans and vampires sharing the same space, the same time, learning to coexist, learning to evolve. Years passed, decades. Serafina aged slowly, a hybrid's aging where decades pass like years. But she aged. Silver threads appeared in her dark hair, lines formed around her eyes. Her body remained strong, enhanced by vampire blood, but time left its mark. Dante painted every change, captured every new line, every silver hair, every subtle shift. His gallery expanded until it filled 3 floors of the sanctuary, a chronicle of their love written in oils and acrylics. They traveled the world, saw every sunrise from every corner of the globe, danced in places she'd only dreamed of, built schools where human and vampire children learned together, created laws that protected both species. Lucian fell in love with a human woman, transformed her into a hybrid with Serafina's blood and Dante's blessing. They built a life together. Proof that what Dante and Serafina had wasn't unique, just rare, just precious. Elena started a movement, young vampires choosing to feed only from willing donors, choosing to integrate into human society rather than hiding from it. She called it the Crimson Dawn, named after the morning Serafina had been crowned. And through it all, Dante and Serafina loved each other, fought sometimes, disagreed on policy and politics, made up in the privacy of their sanctuary, grew together in ways that immortality alone could never achieve. On their 99th anniversary, they returned to the place where it had all begun. The Crimson Eclipse was still open, still filled with dancers and music and humans looking for escape. Serafina walked through the doors, aged but still vibrant, and the memories crashed over her like waves. Standing at the bar with an untouched drink, seeing Dante for the first time shirtless and beautiful and impossibly dangerous, asking him if he was the dancer. Private performances only. Dante appeared beside her. He looked exactly the same as that first night. White hair, silver eyes, tattoos covering his skin. Frozen at 25 forever while she'd lived nearly a century beyond that moment. "Dance with me," he said, and they did. They danced in the center of the floor while the crowd moved around them. Two souls who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build light together. A woman who'd lived a full life and a vampire who'd been waiting for centuries. A queen and a king. They danced until the club closed, until the sun began to rise, until it was time to leave. Outside, the streets were quiet, the city sleeping in that space between night and day. "One more year," Dante said. "The doctors say you have one more good year." Serafina nodded. She could feel it. The hybrid vigor fading, her human biology finally asserting dominance. Death approaching not as tragedy, but as natural conclusion. Then let's make it count. They spent that final year exactly as they'd spent the 99 before it. Loving, living, dancing in twilight and painting in darkness, and building a world that would outlast them both. When the end came, it was gentle. Serafina fell asleep in Dante's arms one night and simply didn't wake. Her heart beat slower and slower until it stopped. Her last breath was a sigh. Her last word was his name. Dante held her for 3 days, refused to let anyone take her, refused to accept that she was gone. On the 4th day, Lucienne came. "Brother," he said gently, "it's time. I can't. You have to. She wouldn't want you to stop living because she did. How do I do this? How do I exist in a world without her? The same way she existed without her first husband. You grieve, you remember. You keep living because that's what she'd want, because the world you built together needs you." They held the funeral at sunrise on the same hilltop where she'd been crowned. Hundreds attended, thousands, vampires and humans and the handful of hybrids she'd created, all come to say goodbye to the Crimson Queen. Dante spoke at the service, his voice breaking. "She was human when I met her, grieving and lost and looking for any escape from her pain. And somehow, impossibly, she looked at a monster and saw a man, looked at darkness and chose to love it. She changed me, changed all of us, proved that even immortals can evolve. That choice matters more than nature. That love is stronger than death." He paused, looking at her casket covered in crimson roses. "She gave me 100 years. I wanted forever, but she was right. 100 years of truly living is worth more than an eternity of merely existing. And I will carry her with me for all the centuries I have left, in every painting, every memory, every choice I make to be better than what I was." They buried her beside Aurelius, reuniting her with her first love, the man who'd protected her, and the vampire king who'd transformed her. Both of them part of her story, both of them worthy of being honored. Dante returned to his sanctuary alone that night. The paintings surrounded him, hundreds of them, thousands, Serafina in every stage of her life, human and hybrid, young and aging, laughing and crying and everything in between. He picked up a brush, a fresh canvas, and began to paint. Not her this time. Them, dancing together in the space between light and dark, her warm skin against his cool body, her mortal heart pressed to his silent chest. Two impossible souls choosing each other, again and again and again. The years passed, decades, centuries. Dante kept ruling, kept building the world they'd started together. Every morning at sunrise, he stood in protective gear and watched the sun rise, remembering, honoring, keeping his promise to keep living. 300 years after her death, a young woman walked into Dante's sanctuary. She had dark hair, hazel eyes, a smile that was sad and hopeful all at once. She looked exactly like Serafina. "7th generation," she said. "The Ashmore bloodline continues. My ancestors' journals told me about you, about her." Dante stared at her, at this impossible echo of the woman he'd lost. "I'm not her," the girl said quickly, "but I am asking you to teach me, to help me understand what I might become." Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, the first real smile he'd made in centuries. Come in. Let me show you her paintings. Let me tell you about a woman who chose love over immortality, who changed the world by refusing to accept that darkness had to mean death. As the sun set and the stars emerged, Dante began to tell the story of Seraphina Ashmore, the Crimson Queen, the hybrid who'd walked in daylight and loved a monster and proven that even the immortal could evolve. And in the telling and the remembering and the sharing of her legacy, she lived again. Not resurrected, not reincarnated, but remembered. And in a world where vampires lived forever, where time stretched endlessly forward, being remembered was its own kind of immortality. The story ended the way all great love stories do, with loss and love, and the understanding that some things transcend death, with the certainty that choice matters more than fate, with a vampire king standing at his window watching another sunrise and whispering to the memory of his queen, "I'm still dancing, Sarah. Still dancing for you, only ever for you." And somewhere in whatever place exists beyond this one, Seraphina smiled.